I thought I was living a dream, married to the man I adored, expecting our first child, and surrounded by people I trusted. But dreams can turn to nightmares fast. While I lay in a hospital bed, bringing our baby into the world, he was in our bed, with my best friend. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was physical, raw, and cruel. What followed was a chain reaction of heartbreak, hidden truths, and one final decision that would change all our lives. If you've ever wondered how deep betrayal can go, this is the story you need to hear. Part 1, Before the Storm. If anyone had asked me a year ago what my life looked like, I would have said, perfect. That's how I felt waking up next to Evan every morning. He was gentle, funny in a dry, quiet kind of way, and looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. We'd been together for 6 years, married for 3, and every time he touched my belly, whispering to our unborn daughter, I felt so lucky it hurt. Then there was Julia, my best friend since college. We met in our freshman writing class and clicked instantly. She was the kind of friend you trust with everything, secrets, tears, the ugly truth. She was bold, a little reckless, but fiercely loyal, or so I thought. Evan loved her too, in the harmless, platonic way husbands love the women their wives trust. Or maybe that's what I forced myself to believe. The pregnancy wasn't easy. At 7 months, I was put on bed rest. Julia started coming over more often, to help with groceries, to keep me company, to take the pressure off Evan. At first, I was grateful. I laughed at their inside jokes, shrugged off the stolen glances. I chalked up every moment of awkwardness to stress, hormones, overthinking. But now I replay it all with razor clarity. One night, I woke up to hushed whispers in the hallway. I thought I was dreaming, until I heard Julia's laugh, low, nervous. Evan said something I couldn't make out. Then silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just lay there, frozen, as my baby kicked gently beneath my ribs like she was trying to remind me, you're not alone. When I asked Evan the next morning why Julia had stayed so late, he said she was helping him organize baby stuff. He smiled, tired, distant. I told myself to stop being paranoid. 2 weeks later, my water broke. It was early, 34 weeks, and I was terrified. Evan rushed me to the hospital, holding my hand, telling me everything would be okay. Julia showed up at the hospital too, bringing snacks, holding my other hand like we were a team. I didn't know then what they were really holding together, or what they were already planning behind my back. Labor was long, complicated. I lost a lot of blood. The nurses buzzed around me like bees. Evan kissed my forehead and whispered, "You're doing great." But I could feel his detachment, like his mind was somewhere else. The baby, our little girl, Emma, was born healthy but tiny. They took her to the NICU. I stayed overnight in recovery, loopy from anesthesia, in and out of sleep. When I woke up in the middle of the night, the bed next to me was empty. No Evan, just silence. I tried calling him, no answer. He didn't return until morning. He said he'd fallen asleep in the waiting room, but his shirt was wrinkled, and his hair looked like he'd been somewhere else, somewhere more comfortable. He kissed me like everything was normal. I didn't question it. I was too tired, too overwhelmed, too broken open from the delivery to even think straight. But it started eating at me. Julia didn't come back to the hospital. Not once. No messages. No congrats. Just silence. And that silence spoke louder than anything. Part 2, Suspicion grows. When I came home from the hospital, nothing felt the same. Our baby girl was still in the NICU, and I was physically and emotionally drained. The house felt empty even when Evan was home. He was helpful, sure, making meals, cleaning, always moving like he was trying to stay busy, but he barely looked me in the eyes. Julia still hadn't texted, not even a "how are you?" I tried to make excuses. Maybe she was overwhelmed, maybe something had happened, but deep down, a gnawing fear kept whispering to me, she's avoiding you because she knows what she did. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. This was Julia, the one who held my hair back when I was sick in college, who helped pick out my wedding dress, who stood next to me on my wedding day and called me her soul sister. But the memory of that night, the whispered conversation in the hallway, the laugh, the silence, it haunted me. I asked Evan casually, "Have you talked to Julia lately?" He didn't even flinch, just shook his head and said, "Not since the hospital." Lie. I knew it was a lie. because I'd already looked at his phone bill. One number stood out, repeated calls and texts, including the night I was recovering in the hospital. I'd memorized Julia's number years ago. I recognized it instantly. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. I wasn't ready for the truth, because once you name it, it becomes real. A few days later, while Evan was at the grocery store, I opened his laptop. I knew his password. I shouldn't have looked. I told myself I wouldn't, but my fingers moved on their own. Gmail. Open. There it was. Dozens of emails, some short, some long. One in particular froze me. Subject: that night. I keep thinking about your face when you walked into the room. You looked like you wanted to stop but couldn't. I didn't either. It wasn't just the wine, it was us. All of it. I don't regret it. Not anymore. It was from Julia. Dated the same night I was in the hospital. My stomach turned. I read it again and again, hoping I was misunderstanding, but the words were clear. There was no doubt now. She had slept with my husband while I was giving birth to our child. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, numb, reading every email like I was reading the obituary of my marriage, like I was burying every moment, every laugh, every anniversary. It was all dead now. When Evan came home, I was calm, too calm. He asked if everything was okay. I looked him in the eye and said, "Did you sleep with Julia?" His face drained of color. Silence. His mouth opened like he might lie, but he didn't. He just looked away and sat down. Hard. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he whispered. I laughed, sharp, cold. "You mean you didn't mean to cheat on your wife while she was bleeding out in a hospital bed bringing your daughter into the world?" I panicked. He said, "I didn't know how to handle the stress. She was there. You were distant." I stood up. I was distant because I was trying to keep our baby alive. "I made a mistake," he said. "One night." "No," I said. "One night is an accident. Emails for weeks is a choice." He didn't deny it. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in the nursery, holding Emma's tiny blanket, rocking in the chair that we'd picked out together, wondering if my daughter would ever know what kind of man her father really was. I knew I needed to leave, but where would I go? How would I raise a newborn alone? Could I trust anyone again? I picked up my phone and opened Julia's contact. I stared at her name. Then I hit record. My voice was quiet, steady. I know everything, and I want you to know something, too. This isn't over." I hit send. Part 3, the quiet before the explosion. After I sent that voice message to Julia, I expected a flurry of calls, an apology, denial, some pathetic excuse. But all I got was silence. No typing bubbles, no missed calls, not even a single emoji to pretend she misunderstood. The next morning, Evan didn't mention anything. He acted like it was a normal Thursday, kissed Emma's picture before leaving for work, poured himself coffee, even asked if I wanted something from the bakery down the street. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the mug in my hand across the kitchen, but instead, I smiled, nodded. Blueberry muffins would be great. I'd never known how powerful silence could be until I started using it myself. That afternoon, I went to my parents' house. I told them I needed a few days to rest and recover with Emma. I didn't mention Evan, not yet. My mom looked at me like she could tell something was wrong, but I brushed it off. "I just need some space," I said. She nodded. "You've always been strong," she told me, "even when you don't feel it." That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, Emma sleeping in the bassinet beside me. I stared at the ceiling, thinking of every moment I'd ever defended Julia. How I used to tell friends, "No, she's just blunt, she doesn't mean anything by it." Or, "She's a little impulsive, but she loves deeply." What a joke. That weekend, I returned home while Evan was at work. I packed slowly, methodically, clothes for me and Emma, baby essentials, documents, photos. The nursery hurt the most. I left behind the blanket Julia had gifted me. I didn't want it touching my daughter's skin. Then I sat down at Evan's computer again. I opened his email, his social media, and I started collecting screenshots, threads, drafts. I wasn't going to make a scene, not yet, but I wanted truth and proof, because I knew what kind of man Evan was. He'd gaslight me if he had the chance, twist it, turn it into my fault. So I prepared, quietly, like someone building a case in the dark. But the final blow didn't come from Evan. It came from Julia. 1 week after I left, I received a text. I didn't want it to be this way, but I love him, and he loves me. We never meant to hurt you, but we're together now. I hope one day you'll understand. Attached was a photo. Them, at a restaurant, smiling, holding hands across the table. I stared at it for a long time. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone. I didn't pick it up right away. I just sat there on the floor, clutching Emma to my chest, feeling the weight of every shattered memory pressed down on me. They were together, officially, publicly. They had taken everything, my marriage, my family, my peace, and now they wanted my acceptance. That's when something shifted in me. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to respond, not with tears, not with rage, but with something they'd never forget. I booked a table at the same restaurant where the photo was taken, a week later. Then I sent a message. To Julia. To Evan. Same time, same place. I have something you both need to hear. One dinner, that's all I ask. I didn't give them a choice, I just waited. And they both replied the same way. Okay. The night of the dinner, I wore black. Not mourning, power. I left Emma with my mom and arrived 5 minutes early. They were already seated. They looked uncomfortable when I walked in, like teenagers caught sneaking out past curfew. Julia opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. Let me talk first. I sat down slowly, letting the silence stretch. Then I reached into my bag and placed a sealed envelope in the middle of the table. What's this? Evan asked. Everything, I said. Emails, texts, dates, phone records, the full truth, neatly printed and ready to be sent to your jobs, your friends, our families, but I haven't sent them yet. Julia paled. Evan looked like he wanted to run. I'm not here to scream or fight, I said. I'm here to tell you that you didn't break me. You may have betrayed me, humiliated me, and destroyed everything we built, but I'm still here. And I'm not crawling away, I'm walking away, with my head high. They were speechless. And just so you know, I smiled slightly. This dinner, it's the last time you'll ever see me. I stood up, picked up the envelope, and left a second one on the table, smaller, lighter. Inside were printed ultrasound photos of Emma. One for Evan, one for Julia. The only family they'd never truly know. Part 4, When Everything Falls Apart. I walked out of the restaurant with trembling hands and a stomach in knots. My heels clicked against the pavement like echoes of a life collapsing behind me. I didn't stop to look back. I couldn't bear to see them sitting there, whispering and laughing like my pain wasn't real. Like I didn't just watch my husband emotionally strip away the last bit of dignity I had. I got in my car and gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The silence was deafening. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. Instead, the tears came, silent and hot, pouring down in waves I couldn't stop. Everything I'd buried inside me, the suspicion, the heartbreak, the denial, erupted in one agonizing flood. But even then, I knew I couldn't let it drown me. I had a daughter who needed me. I had to survive this, for her, if not for myself. The next morning, my world exploded. It started with a phone call from my mother. Sweetheart, what's going on? Her voice cracked through the speaker. Why are people sending me pictures of you, Evan, and her? Someone had taken a photo at the restaurant and posted it online. A friend of a friend tagged me. Then someone else commented. And suddenly, a private implosion became a public spectacle. Old family friends were messaging me. My aunt sent a string of expletive-filled texts. Even my grandmother, who barely uses her phone, somehow found the post and sent me a broken heart emoji. The shame burned more than the betrayal. But worse than the noise was Evan's silence. He didn't call, he didn't text, he didn't even try to explain. It was as if he knew, this time, I wasn't just hurt, I was done. 2 weeks later, I filed for divorce. My lawyer was kind, gentle even, as she explained the steps and legalities. I sat across from her, numb but composed, nodding where appropriate. It felt surreal, signing papers that marked the death of something I once believed was unbreakable. I wore the same engagement ring Evan gave me 12 years ago. I hadn't taken it off, not even now. But after I walked out of that office, I slipped it off and dropped it into my coat pocket without a word. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. It was late. The house was quiet. My daughter was fast asleep. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe, really breathe. The pain was still there, sharp and overwhelming. But beneath it was something else, resolve. I wasn't going to crumble. I wasn't going to let them ruin me. But fate had other plans. It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. A blocked number. It rang once, then twice. I picked up on instinct. "Mrs. Callahan?" A woman's voice asked. "This is Nurse Stephanie from Mercy General. Your husband was just brought in. There's been an accident." My heart stopped. I sat upright, gripping the phone. "What kind of accident?" "He was found unconscious in his car. Head trauma. It's serious." Everything around me spun. For all the pain Evan caused, I never wished him harm. I was angry. Yes, betrayed. But I never imagined something like this. I threw on a coat, grabbed my keys, and drove through the rain, barely seeing the road through my tears. When I arrived, they led me to the ICU. Machines beeped rhythmically. Evan lay on the hospital bed, pale and motionless. Tubes connected to him like tangled roots. His head was wrapped. His chest rose and fell, slow but steady. And sitting by his side, holding his hand, was her. Amelia. She looked up at me, eyes red. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. "I called him," she whispered. "He was driving to see me, and he never made it." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there, frozen, watching the man who shattered my heart teeter on the edge of life and death, while the woman he chose wept at his side. And in that moment, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Part 5, Between the Living and the Dead. I stood in the cold fluorescent light of the ICU room, watching the man who destroyed my heart lie broken in a hospital bed. Machines surrounded him, each beep a reminder that he was still here, and yet so far away. Tubes snaked across his body, and the white bandages around his head looked like a cruel mockery of a wedding veil. My wedding veil, the vows, the promises, all of it meaningless now. Amelia wouldn't look at me again. She sat frozen by his bedside, clutching his hand like it was hers to hold. I wanted to scream, to tear her fingers off him, to demand she leave, but I didn't. I was so far past rage. I'd reached the edge of numbness. There was no fire left, only ash. A nurse entered the room quietly and looked between us. "He's stable for now, but the next 24 hours are critical." She handed me a clipboard. "Next of kin. You'll need to sign off on care decisions." I stared at it. I was still his wife. Legally, emotionally, I wasn't sure anymore. But in this room, I was the only one who could decide whether he lived or died. I signed my name with a trembling hand. The nurse gave a small nod and left us alone again. I finally turned to Amelia. "You shouldn't be here." Her eyes welled again. "Please, don't do this. I didn't mean for." "Save it." My voice cut through the air like ice. "You meant every lie, every stolen touch, every look across the room when you thought I wasn't watching." She stood, trembling. "I loved him, and he loved me." The audacity made my chest tighten. "Then maybe you should be the one signing that paper." Her lip quivered. "He was coming to break it off. With you. Tonight. That's why he was driving." I stepped forward, close enough to smell the perfume I once gave her for Christmas. "And now look where your love got him." She flinched. For a moment, I thought she might walk out. But instead, she sat back down beside him like she belonged there. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. I spent the night in the hospital corridor, curled up in a plastic chair that made my spine ache. My phone buzzed constantly, texts from my mom, from friends, even from Evan's brother, who'd flown in from Seattle. I ignored them all. The hours passed in a fog of vending machine coffee, nurses murmuring down hallways, and the occasional cry from another room. Pain has many voices in a hospital. By morning, Evan's condition hadn't changed. Neither had Amelia's presence. She refused to leave. So I did. I drove home in silence. My daughter was staying with my mother for a few nights. I didn't have to face her questions. Not yet. I collapsed onto the couch, still in yesterday's clothes, and for the first time in weeks, I let out a sound so raw it didn't even feel human. Grief. It wasn't just about the accident. It was everything. The marriage, the betrayal, the public humiliation, the fact that Amelia had taken so much from me, and now she had this too. His final moments, if they came, would be with her. But what haunted me most was this question I couldn't shake. Did I still love him? I thought about the first time I met Evan, how he made me laugh so hard I snorted wine through my nose, how he danced like a fool at our wedding just to make me smile, how he held our daughter for the first time, crying like a child himself. Those memories lived in a different time, untouched by betrayal, but they still lived. I picked up our wedding photo from the bookshelf. We looked so young, so full of dreams. I traced the edges of the glass with my thumb and whispered, "Why did you have to ruin everything?" 2 days passed. On the third, Evan opened his eyes. The nurse called me first. "He's awake, disoriented, but he's asking for you." My stomach flipped. Not Amelia? Me. I rushed to the hospital, heart thudding in my chest. I didn't know what I expected: tears, apologies, explanations. But when I entered the room, he looked at me with blank eyes. "Rachel?" His voice was raspy. "What happened?" Tears welled in my eyes. "You were in an accident." He blinked. I remember the rain. Then, nothing. Amelia stood in the corner, arms crossed. She didn't rush to him. She didn't speak. Something had shifted. Evan looked around, confused. "Why are you both here?" I stepped closer. "Because you asked for me." He stared at me for a long moment. "I did." I nodded. And for a second, just a second, I saw the man I once loved behind those tired, bruised eyes. But it wasn't enough. It couldn't be. Not anymore. That night, I watched the sunset from the hospital parking lot. Orange and pink streaks painted the sky like a wound trying to heal. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if Evan would recover fully, or if Amelia would stay, or if I'd ever be able to move past the damage they caused. But I knew this. I had survived. I had faced the storm and didn't drown. And whatever the future held, I'd walk into it stronger than before. Because sometimes, survival is the real revenge. Part 6, Pieces that don't fit anymore. It's strange how silence feels louder after everything breaks. Evan was awake, alive, breathing. And yet, nothing felt right anymore. The man I had once trusted with every part of myself now looked like a stranger in a borrowed body. His voice, when he spoke, was softer than I remembered, as though part of him was still lost in that rainy night. But what truly haunted me was the way he looked at me, with confusion, with guilt, with something like longing, but never with certainty. Amelia stayed away after that first day. She left the hospital without saying goodbye. No tears, no demands, just a quiet vanishing act, like a thief who realized the house she broke into wasn't worth burning down anymore. A week later, I found a letter from her in our mailbox. "Rachel, I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't come to steal anything. I just stayed too long where I didn't belong. Please don't hate me forever. I'm leaving. Don't try to find me. Amelia." No return address, no number, just 6 lines written in shaky ink. I crumpled it in my fist and dropped it in the trash. But the ache in my chest stayed. Evan was moved from the ICU to a private room. I visited once a day, mostly in silence. Our daughter, Claire, still didn't know the full truth. I told her Daddy was hurt in a car accident, and that he was going to be okay. She made him cards with crooked hearts and glitter stickers, and I watched him cry the first time he held one. Guilt, regret, maybe even shame. But not once did he say he was sorry. I think that hurt more than the affair itself. He remembered everything now. The accident, the months leading up to it, Amelia, me. He even remembered the hotel room, the lies, the text messages he swore he'd deleted, but he didn't speak about it. He looked at me with hollow eyes, like someone waiting to be punished, too afraid to ask for forgiveness. One afternoon, I brought him clean clothes and sat by the window as he ate his hospital dinner in silence. "I thought you'd hate me," he said suddenly. I looked out at the parking lot, lit orange in the late day sun. "I did. And now? I didn't answer right away. I don't think I feel anything anymore, I said softly, just tired. He winced like I'd slapped him. I was lost, he murmured, and she made me feel seen. I turned my head slowly toward him. You were lost? I whispered. You felt invisible? My voice shook as the weight of his words sank in. I gave you everything, Evan. My trust, my youth, my body, my heart. I stayed up feeding your child while you worked late, except you weren't working. I forgave every little crack because I believed the foundation was solid. And you felt seen by my sister? He looked away. I didn't plan it, he said. No, you just let it happen. He didn't argue. He didn't offer excuses. And somehow, that made it worse. 2 weeks after the accident, he was discharged. I drove him home. To our house. But nothing about it felt like ours anymore. The bed felt too small, the silence too heavy. Claire was thrilled to see him. She wrapped her arms around his waist and cried against his stomach. He hugged her back, whispering, I missed you, baby, like he hadn't shattered her world behind her back. I slept in the guest room that night. And the night after that. Until one morning, I woke up to find him gone. Just gone. No note, no call. At first, I panicked. Had something happened? Another accident? A medical setback? But then I checked our joint bank account. He'd withdrawn most of it. Just like that. The second betrayal was quieter, crueler, more calculated. This time, there was no Amelia to blame. The following days blurred together. My mother moved in to help with Claire. I filed a police report, just in case, but part of me knew he wasn't missing. He'd just chosen to leave. Again. 4 weeks. I checked the front door every night, hoping he'd come back, hoping for closure, or an apology, or even a confrontation, but the only thing that ever came was silence. And then, a call. A number I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I answered. Mrs. Holloway? Yes? This is Officer Reynolds with the State Patrol. I'm afraid we've located a vehicle registered under your husband's name. There's been an accident. The air left my lungs. Not again. Not this time. I drove for hours, numb. My mother stayed with Claire while I crossed state lines to the edge of a rural highway where Evan's car had careened off a cliff. The wreckage was almost unrecognizable. His body had been recovered. There was no doubt. He was gone. Truly gone. I didn't cry at first. Not at the crash site. Not even when they handed me his watch and wallet. It wasn't until I got home, after tucking Claire into bed, that I opened the envelope they gave me. Inside was a letter, his handwriting. Rachel. I didn't know how to fix what I broke. I thought I could start over, make it right somehow. But I realized too late that some things can't be undone. I never stopped loving you. I was just too weak to be the man you deserved. Tell Claire I'm sorry. Tell her I loved her. And you, always. Evan. I dropped the letter and fell to my knees. For all the pain he caused, all the betrayal and lies, he was still the man I once loved. And now he was gone. Forever. Part 7, The Quiet Rebuilding. Grief doesn't arrive like a storm. It seeps in quietly, through the light under a closed door, through the way the house creaks when no one's awake, through the drawer of toothbrushes that still holds his. The funeral was small. Just family, a few of his old co-workers, and neighbors who brought casseroles wrapped in aluminum foil. Claire didn't understand why everyone was dressed in black. She clutched my hand and whispered, "Is Daddy really not coming back this time?" I nodded and held her close, heartbreaking all over again. He was buried on a cloudy morning, the kind that presses down on you like a wet coat. I didn't speak during the service. I let the silence say everything, the anger, the sorrow, the years I'd never get back. I placed the letter he'd written in the coffin, tucked beside a photo of the three of us, before it all fell apart. It felt like burying a version of myself, too. In the weeks that followed, the world kept moving. Bills came, dishes piled up. Claire had to get to school. My mother stayed longer than planned, folding laundry, making dinner, filling in the gaps I couldn't manage. Some nights I wandered into our bedroom, my bedroom now, and sat on the edge of the bed, just listening, not for anything in particular, just the quiet. just the stillness. There was no more yelling, no lies, no pretending. But peace didn't come right away. I missed him, and I hated that I missed him. I hated that I still loved parts of the man who hurt me. I hated that he got the last word with that letter. I hated that he ran instead of staying to fix what he broke. But most of all, I hated how unfinished everything felt. Like a sentence that ended mid-word. Like a song that never got its chorus. One night, I found Claire sitting on the floor of her room with a photo album. She looked up at me and asked, "Do you think Daddy's still sad?" My throat tightened. "No, baby. I think he's somewhere peaceful now." She thought for a second. "Do you still love him?" That was the question, wasn't it? "I think," I said carefully, "when you really love someone, that love doesn't disappear, even when they hurt you. It just changes. It becomes something different." She nodded, satisfied with that. And I realized I was, too. Spring came slowly. I started going for walks again, letting the wind hit my face, letting the world in. The grief didn't vanish, it never does, but it softened around the edges. I packed up Evan's things one Sunday afternoon, not in anger, not as revenge, just as an act of moving forward. I kept a few photos for Claire, his watch, and a journal he used to keep in the nightstand drawer. The rest went into boxes for donation. I found Amelia's necklace tangled in a sock drawer. At first, I wanted to throw it out the window, but I didn't. I dropped it in an envelope. No return address, just a post office drop slot and a quiet goodbye. I never saw her again. And I didn't need to. Forgiveness didn't mean letting her back into my life. It just meant I was ready to stop letting her live in my head. 6 months after Evan's death, I stood in front of a mirror before my first therapy appointment. I adjusted my blouse, ran a brush through my hair, and stared at the woman looking back at me. She was tired, worn, a little older than she remembered. But there was light in her eyes again. A flicker of something fierce. I walked into that therapist's office and said the words I never thought I'd say. "I don't know who I am without him, but I'd like to find out." And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. Claire is older now. She asks less about her father and more about the world. She's curious, smart, strong in ways I never expected. She keeps a framed photo of him on her desk, one where he's carrying her on his shoulders, both of them laughing. I let her hold on to the good memories. She deserves that. As for me, I write. I fill journals with truths I was too afraid to speak before. I tell our story to myself, over and over, until it stops hurting as much. And sometimes, I imagine a version of our life where Evan stayed, where things didn't fall apart, where I didn't have to rebuild from ashes. But I don't live there. I live here, in the now, in the small joys, coffee on quiet mornings, Claire's bedtime hugs, the softness of clean sheets, in the strength I found not because I wanted to, but because I had no other choice. This wasn't the life I planned. But it's the one I have. And I'm learning to love it anyway.